Evening all. We have still, we are expecting a few more to join in along the way, but we generally prefer to start on time. And just to give a short introduction to the sessions and to the speakers before we move to the first speaker. Hope all of you are keeping safe and doing well in these challenging times. This is the third part of a series of web sessions we have been organizing on child protection and child well-being during the pandemic, Voices from the Field, with expert resource persons. Today we have Arlene Manoharan and Bharti Ali as the speakers. Before we get to the speakers, how do we go about the sessions? Just a few minutes just for the speakers also. So each of the speakers would have about 15 to 20 minutes to present, whether they have a PPT or they just want to share their thoughts and experiences about the issues at hand. I'll be introducing each speaker briefly and also act as a timekeeper. I'll switch on my video when it's about 5 minutes towards the end, and also post a message on the chat to the individual speakers. We would like the sessions to be participative and interactive. And those of you who were there in the past 2 days saw that we had a lot of discussion and interesting ones at that, both the sessions yesterday and the day before, and hope it will be similar today also. So after the two speakers are done, we'll open it up for question and answers. We request you to post your questions as and when you have them on the Q&A option and mention the speakers to whom the question is addressed. We'll be collating and sharing these questions with the speakers. Please do not post any questions on chat. Again, a request from the entire team that if you could rename yourself in terms of your name and underscore the organization name where you are, which you are representing. The sessions are primarily in English, unfortunately, but we have requested the speakers to use a mix of English and Hindi as may be possible. So Arlene and Bharti, please see if you can use a mix of English and Hindi as and well possible. So without much delay, I'll move on to our first speaker today is Arlene Manoharan. Arlene is a child protection specialist. She's a part-time consultant with Enfold Bangalore, provides voluntary support to the government of Karnataka on matters concerning children and their rights, particularly during the pandemic. Arlene will be speaking on mechanisms to provide child-safe professional volunteer services to children affected or infected by COVID-19 based on state civil society partnership. So Arlene, over to you. You have about 20 minutes and then we move to Bharti. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rahul, and for all of you at Wipro, and for all of you who are listening here to me. It's indeed a privilege to join hands and hearts with all of you who really have a deep concern for children. I hope to be able to share a few pointers, basically to focus on child protection and how we can endeavor to reach out to children in a good way, in a professional way, at the same time being careful about how we should, in our endeavor to do good, we should not do any harm. So with little time to be wasted, just two concepts, two key concepts. Many of us are familiar with the word child protection, and there are certain complex nuances between the term child protection and child safeguarding. Child protection can be programs, measures, and structures to prevent and respond to abuse, exploitation, neglect, and violence affecting children anywhere, in all sectors, in all contexts, and in all environments. So it's a very broad term. But child safeguarding is a more specific term that is being used internationally and to some extent in India. But in India, child safeguarding is being conflated with child protection. And I'd just like to explain that difference. Child safeguarding is a duty of care and responsibility of private and public organizations to adopt preventative and responsive systems, policies, and practices to safeguard from harm and abuse all the children they come into direct and indirect contact with in their day-to-day operations and work. So here, if we are talking about, say, Wipro Foundation and bringing together volunteers and NGOs and groups of people who want to reach out to children affected and infected by COVID, the goal here would be to ensure that Wipro Foundation has a system in place to say that who you're going to partner with. You already have partner organizations, yes. Do all the partner organizations have a child safeguarding policy where it is clear that when they engage with children, they have certain systems in place. They're going to recruit their staff properly, they're going to induct them, they're going to have codes of conduct, etc. So this child safeguarding policy and system is something that we do to be able to ensure that in our endeavor to reach out to, in the context of COVID, reach out to children who are affected or infected as well as families, we do no harm. So a little bit about child safeguarding as I go along. And if there are any questions related to this, I'm happy to answer at later. Okay, so all of us are living in a community in a widest sense in this country. And in this wide community, we have children and others who are affected and infected by COVID. However, we have different institutions, organizations, groups that come or they spring from the community, but they establish themselves. Now, here is an example of a childcare institution, which it could be run by an NGO or by the government. You have a child line or a special juvenile police unit. These are state structures, a statutory structure under the JJ Act. You have child civil society organizations, say like CRY, Dream a Dream, other organizations, who really specialize in volunteer management. They actively encourage and they engage volunteers and they use volunteers on a regular basis, and they have systems in place to reach out to children in various situations, and they are now also working on COVID. You also have CSOs offering direct services to children, like, for example, conducting social investigation reports, preparing individual care plans, following up with children, conducting online services or activities with children. So they're engaging directly with children affected or I would say affected, infected may not be so much, because here you are either going to visit the home of a child, or you're directly talking with the child on the phone, or you're following up and you're engaging directly with the child. So it could be indirect, it could be online, but it's direct. Similarly, you have organizations who really don't go out on the field. They're sitting at home on their desks and engaging in advocacy and fundraising. But all these establishments, organizations, institutions, when they come up within the community, what happens? There is a likelihood of some interaction with children in the community where there is a possibility of some form of abuse, neglect, exploitation, some form of violence. Now, this is what we need to protect, or we need to ensure that by getting into action during COVID into the community, we are not causing harm to children. So this is where the whole goal of child is. I just like to highlight Article 19 of the UNCRC, which is really the core article, which really makes it a duty for all of us to ensure that whatever we do, we need to ensure that all children have a right to protection from all forms of violence. It's a right. And many of our laws and the Constitution also supported this provision. And this form of how do we protect and how do we prevent violence against the children? We need to have support for a child who may have been abused. We need to prevent. We need to identify abuse. We need to be even aware that, hey, we're doing the social media campaign and we didn't realize that this one word that we're using is stigmatizing, or it's actually giving a wrong impression, and it's actually leading to children being sold for adoption. So what is it that we are doing in our social media campaign that we are actually contributing to harm to children? Similarly, reporting, are we reporting to the authorities whenever it is required? Is there referral systems in place? When there is a need for an investigation, are we open to conduct an investigation if some of our volunteers or staff have been involved in some form of harm? Are we really open to that, even though it's in the midst of the pandemic? Are we really trying to be professional? Are we ensuring treatment, and are we ensuring follow-up instances? Where necessary, are we really strong enough to be able to say, yes, this happened in our organization, one of our staff was involved in an abuse, and do we as managements and as professionals go forward and file an FIR, because we also want to be accountable. We just don't want the state to be accountable. We need to be accountable too. Now, basically in the whole child rights-based approach issue, we have children and adolescents who are rights holders. They're not just beneficiaries in terms of a charity-based approach. And, we're doing such great work. And now you take these rations from us, but you take this photo with us, because we need this photo. and you are, so sometimes we get into this whole, charity, benevolent kind of approach. I'm not undermining the value of charity. It's how we do it from a rights base, that these children are children with dignity. They may be deprived at this point, but they are like your child and mine. You also have the state and other duty bearers just like us. All of us now in this situation where we are coming together, we also have a duty. We may not be part of a registered organization, but as adults who are now reaching out to children, we are also duty bearers. And what is our duty in terms of children? We need to respect, protect, and fulfill legal obligations towards children. And what does that mean? It means that we need to respect children's rights. We need to understand what is a rights-based approach. We should not interfere with the enjoyment of children's rights. We need to protect their rights. So if we see other people who are harming children or violating their rights, we need to be able to stand up and call out these issues and to take steps when to report or to ensure that some accountability is there, and to fulfill those rights, to provide wherever it is required. So most often now, if we have been given funds or we have resources and we are supposed to provide these ration kits and these sponsorship amount money that is coming from donors, we are providing. But we, as duty bearers, are we doing it from a rights-based approach? And are we claiming, empowering children and their families to say, hey, these are the social protection schemes that are available. This is for you. You have a right to it. And here is the information. I'm going to give you, this little chit of paper, and this is who you call, and this is your right to get it. And empower them to claim it with dignity. Now, with regard to child protection and child safeguarding, an overall approach to child protection and child safeguarding requires that we understand the risks to children that we pose. We may be posing risks to children, and we need to address those risks with the range of measures that create a child-safe environment. The more we talk about it and recognize risk, especially during this pandemic, the more we can think about effectively preventing, reporting, and acting on it. So we have to talk about risks, not just good intentions, not about the great work that you're doing, but hey, are we doing it right? Are we doing it in a manner that is not causing harm to children? I can't see the top of my slides, but anyway, the key features: prevention and capacity development, audits and risk assessments. When we are engaging with children, are we really auditing ourselves? Are we conducting risk assessments to identify and prevent those risks? Are we able to manage those risks? Do we strengthen children's awareness and ability to cope with the risk of abuse? For example, if now we have volunteers who we engage to say, hey, will you do a check-in with these children? They've just been released from childcare institutions. And we really need to know, because many of these children are being pushed out because the system is finding it difficult to cope. And because we have a Supreme Court judgment, many of these childcare institutions, both government and NGO, are sending children back home to situations where they came from in the first place. Now, when we have volunteers or staff who are checking in on these children, are we sure that the way the volunteers speak to these children, the kind of information that is shared with them, or is it such that whatever risk there may be, are these volunteers screened? Because they are now getting into the homes of these children. There is a mobile phone and they're maybe sharing numbers. Is there any other unsafe information that is being shared with these children? To move on, ensure quality recruitment and induction of staff and volunteers, and provide constant training to help staff and volunteers become a driving force in an environment that promotes the well-treatment of children. After the prevention and the capacity development, are we reporting and are we responsive to abuse or harm when it takes place? Is it a system that, suppose in our organization, something happens that, one of our staff and one of our volunteers has shared pornographic material with a child? What do? Do you have a system in place to be able to act on it? Because the whole credibility of your entire campaign, your entire COVID relief work is going to be hinging on the authenticity, the credibility, and the rights-based approach in which you respond to such situations. Our staff, our volunteers, and other collaborators informed on the measures that will be taken in such situations, and what protection measures are going to be provided to these children? Is there going to be a referral system? Are there people who are going to provide services? And is there a monitoring and a regular audit for how we're doing this? Pandemic has been here for more than a year. And God knows how long this is going to take to continue. But are we really auditing ourselves and saying, are we adhering to certain basic minimum standards? So what are the key features of a safe civil society organization? Many of us have enjoyed the breeze and the fresh air as we sit under these trees like this. I dream of those days myself. Do children feel that they can come to us and sit under this tree, which is the services that we are offering, and feel safe? There's a trusted adult here. Their voice will be heard. Their needs will be met. There is a safe space where there is volunteerism with dignity. Is our service such that every child has access to this service? We're not discriminating against any child, even a child who is found to have committed a heinous crime. Are we willing to really reach out to such boys and girls? Do we have it in our heart to be able to say, hey, you know what? We have some rations and I don't care about your background. You're hungry, you have a right to this food, you will have it. Do we also understand what is the best interest of the child? I think this term has been bandied about in so many PhDs and so many papers, but how do we really apply this principle when we're working during COVID? What is the best interest of this child whom I'm dealing with, or this group of children that we're working with? A lot more conversations to follow because of that. Also, do we recognize children as rights holders? What does it mean to recognize a child as a rights holder? We understand basically human rights. What is the difference between human rights and child rights? What does it do to us as adults when children ask us questions, or in their agency and they say, hey, you are supposed to give us rations and we've not received rations for so long, and you people are corrupt. And if a child talks back to us like this, our BP will rise. We will say, how dare you? This is a human nature. Many of us have, I've been through that myself. How do you work with that power dynamic within? To say, hey, this child is a rights holder. This child has a right to these services. What does that mean to consider children as rights holders? So Child Safeguarding has a Safe Child Civil Society organization has a strong focus on prevention of abuse. And this would mean a child safeguarding policy, code of conduct, a declaration that has to be signed by every staff and volunteer. Signed declaration that says that this is what I can do and this is what I will not do. And if I do this, I will be held accountable and action can be taken against me. Are our physical and online infrastructure safe? Do we have online systems where data of children, photographs of children are not being bandied about and projected just to raise funds, drawing from these poor, depraved children who have need our money? How are systems really safe? Are our training programs in place? And are we recruiting safe people, as well as in terms of we are engaging with volunteers? Do we have a volunteer management system? Children's right to be heard. I think many of us experience this when we engage with children, even in adolescence, and even if we're much older and our children are 20 and 30 and 40, we still have these power dynamics. As organizations who are working with children, are we really empowering children? And this is one of my favorite photographs and one of my favorite films. I hope all of you have seen it. If you haven't, COVID will be the best time to see this film. Just look at the expressions on every child's face. Look at the engagement with this adult. Look at the way he has knelt down to eye level. Look at the animated. He's not speaking from his mouth. He's speaking with his eyes, with his ears. Yes, speaking with his ears, speaking with his heart. And look at the kind of relationship that is being enjoyed here. Do we have this relation? Can we build this relation? This is what children are yearning for. Children are alone, segregated, alienated, child marriage, violence. Is there one trusted adult, one safe adult that a child can engage with as a friend, as a trusted person? This is really, really crucial for us who are adults and maybe years of service behind us. Can we get down really to engage with a child as another human being with dignity? Here again, respect for children's views and listening to them. So Safe Child Civil Society organization needs to recruit and train its staff. We need to be ensured that we do no harm. And that is a principle is adhered to by everybody, because it's everyone's responsibility to keep children safe. Not just the manager, not just the social worker, the counselor. Every volunteer, every parent, every associate, every vendor, everyone is responsible that we do no harm through effective child safeguarding. So tuning into ourselves, I think it's important. A lot of us got a lot of information about, this is what we have to do during COVID. This is what the different training programs, blah, blah, blah. Have we spent a moment to reflect on how we are being challenged by the voices of children and youth on the margins, affected or infected by COVID? What is happening to us? Are we reacting? Are we getting angry? And is that anger, is that frustration coming out when we are working? What is happening? Are we taking care of ourselves? And are we being professional so that our baggage, our anxiety is not foisted onto children? What attitudes, biases, values, and behaviors do I recognize in me that serve as barriers in fulfilling my responsibility as a volunteer or a manager? So am I biased against children who are committing crime? Do we know, I know at least 3 girls, school-going girls who I know we have worked with over many years, now on the street, most likely into crime, robbing just to feed their stomach, getting into theft just to feed themselves, getting into other forms of crime. What does this do to me? Because I know these kids. What am I being called to do? And what am I called to stop doing to ensure that I am a safe person and my organization and my service is safe? So here are some things that we may need to think about. In which ways does a CSO have contact, access, or impact on children directly or indirectly? We need to map this. What are the kinds of programs we are offering, services and activities? What are the kind of people that we have in our program? What are the kind of operations that we have? And are all these safe? Our communications, our information, the images, the events that we organize, is it all safe? So here is a small tool that I have drawn from the ministry. I'm sorry, the whole thing is not being shown in the source. It is the Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth from Singapore. And here is a useful tool where they have a risk assessment matrix, where you have a various criteria and you need to assess your service, your volunteer service during COVID, to see if volunteers or staff are going into situations of low risk, moderate risk, or high risk. Are you aware of it? And are your staff and volunteers trained to handle it? And what safety precautions are they taking to keep themselves safe, as well as to not spread COVID? So it's not just a health issue here. With regard to child safeguarding, are they also doing no harm in other ways? Are they not abusing, exploiting, or neglecting children who are affected or infected by COVID? So that can be shared with you. You can have more information about that later. I just want to highlight, now I'm coming to the end of my time, I understand. I just want to highlight the fact that the Supreme Court of India has drawn attention to the situation of children. And there was a Supreme Court judgment that was brought out in 3rd of April last year. Yes, it's a year ago. And what the Supreme Court said: begin preparing for a disaster emergent situation that may arise and work with persons in charge of CCIs and DCPUs to plan shifts, rotations, and reduce in-person contact. But here the point underlined in blue: begin developing a system for how to organize trained volunteers who could step into care for children when the needs arise. I really would like to learn from others. Has these systems really been put in place? Has there been volunteer management systems that organizations already have, and can we exchange notes? I have already organized just 3-4 days ago, brought together CRY, Dream a Dream, Indus Action, other organizations who work with volunteers, and some of us here in Karnataka, to say, hey, listen, let's just work together as civil society organizations. Can we pool our wisdom together and see how we can do this more professionally? What tools do we have? What systems, what databases do we have? Let's not duplicate, let's learn from each other. I think the time has come, if it's not already happening, to do this more. Now, mechanisms for ensuring child. So some of the information, of course, we need to be clear that in certain cases, really the safest way would be to approach Childline, approach the police, engage the state. I underline certain cases. That's not in all cases. Not in all cases that do children need to be pushed into the child protection system. Which children need to be pushed in, which children require the protection by the state is something that would need to be discussed, perhaps with technical support from people who have experience. But there may be families who just need support, given advice, given some handouts to say, hey, listen, this is what you can do and you can manage it on your own. I had brought out some guidance note last year, again, for strengthening collaboration between the state governments and civil society to support vulnerable children affected by COVID. And this document is available on the Enfold website. There are some do's and don'ts with regard to what a civil society can do. I didn't want to, it's available for you, you can check it. Some of that definitely needs to be updated. Specifically now with regard to civil society initiatives which are not necessarily engaged with the state. This particular point, you should have come up under point 1, but basically in Karnataka, what some of us have suggested is that on the official website of the Directorate of ICPS and Department of Women and Child Development, Google Forms in terms of volunteer registration forms for individuals as well as NGOs has been uploaded onto the official website of the government. So here, people who want to collaborate with the state, you go directly to the website of the government, and the government with support from certain NGOs and advisors, etc., will help to organize that. But this is not the only way that we can come together. We can come together as civil society on our own. And I would think that in order to do this, I had also submitted another note on the 10th of May. It's a work in progress in terms of how we can volunteer and organize our volunteer management. Some of the few suggestions that I have, that I do feel that we do need advisory technical support teams, which need to be multidisciplinary as well as multi-sectoral. Because in various situations of emergency and crisis, we may not know what needs to be done. We need to be humble enough to ask for help. And if we have these emergency response teams and advisory technical support teams ready, on a timely basis, we'll be able to access that technical support to make decisions in terms of what needs to be done. Format for a declaration, a signed document that volunteers need to sign when they engage or want to work with children in this context. Format for that is also available on that document. I also feel that many of us, we may not think it is important, but I really believe that an ID card is important, because there are so many people with good intentions, and many more, I think, who do not have good intentions and may be causing harm to children. So formal ID cards are important. Again, volunteer opportunities, roles, and corresponding do's and don'ts. In the area of health and volunteerism, there's a separate do's and don'ts. In the area of home visits and follow-ups of children, there's separate do's and don'ts. So sectorally and with different groups of children in different contexts, there needs to be an evolving set of do's and don'ts, which could be guidelines that could be updated. A volunteer management system, many of you may be familiar. We need to have these systems. I'm just repeating it again, but a few additional points: screening, engagement and induction in terms of the contract and a declaration and ID cards. Training, I cannot underscore how important this is. Even those of us who are trained, who have experience, are finding it sometimes complex issues where we really need more advice. Documentation and reporting. So are we professional in the way that we're even recording what we're doing? Is there a scientific database? Is that information system something that is being coordinated and in a professional manner? And are we transparent and accountable, especially with regard to the funds that we have? Because credibility is really something that is non-negotiable at this point in time. Last, I think I will close here with this: schools of social work. It's just some recommendations of how civil society and the state may partner, and if not civil society and the state, even on our own. Schools of social work, schools of, departments of psychology, law schools may consider adopting childcare institutions. I'm just imagining if there is a CCI that is the whole weight of an institution to support these staff who are holding those forts, many of them affected by COVID, struggling with anxiety, family members unwell, and unable to take leave because they're government officers. Can we not support them with our wisdom, with our institutional mechanisms? And students could be given grace marks to say, hey, listen, if you're going to put in so many hours of volunteering with us, you don't need to answer, you just need to answer 60% of your paper. Can't we make these rules and suggestions? Technical support, even for child welfare committees, for case management, and particularly also on multidisciplinary case conferences, something that Enfold also offers. If there are complex cases that people want to discuss, they don't know what to do. There are so many legal issues, so many laws to look at. The situation, the family is separated. Enfold offers a service wherein you may refer a case to us, and we will facilitate a process where we identify the expertise that is required from various disciplines as well as various sectors, government departments, and organize a process where we facilitate these conferences and make recommendations for consideration by the concerned authorities. The district child protection units are meant to be the nodal units within the district, and similarly in the rural areas, in the talukas and the gram panchayats. What are the focal points, focal groups that really need the support of civil society? Can we really adopt some of these and really work with them, try to understand what is it that they need and how we can draw in using our contacts and our connections to support them? Just partner with hospitals to set up COVID care centers for infected children. And another recommendation to support ICDS staff. This is something that we heard just this morning. Some of us were on a meeting with the Karnataka High Court Committee on monitoring of COVID. And very interesting, at least this is the first time I heard about it, the ICDS scheme services certain children below 6, but could ICDS be expanded to children above 6 years who are infected or affected by COVID, and can CSOs support that as well? That's all I will end for now. I hope that I've been able to offer some points for discussion and consideration. Thank you.
Thanks a ton, Aline. That was really a lot of information, and I don't know whether we won't be able to summarize that in Hindi, but I hope some of the discussions and the question and answers which we take up after Bharati's presentation will help clarify some of the issues. I request again the attendees to please pose their questions as and when they have it on the Q&A button. We'll move on to our second speaker for the evening. We have here with us today Bharti Ali. Bharti Ali is the co-founder and executive director of HUC, Center for Child Rights. She'll be speaking on child protection issues, juvenile justice, child sexual abuse, and child trafficking. Bharti, over to you. Just to share with you, I think Bharti has problems with her camera, and she will be just sharing her audio. Over to you, Bharti. And Bharti, if you can use a mix of English and Hindi, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Rahul. And I'll just, while taking forward from what Arlene has said, I would actually like to start with the question as to who are the children that we're really talking about and we need to focus on. I don't see any child who has not been affected by COVID. Whether child in school, out of school, child of somebody who is a daily wage laborer, or child of somebody who is a civil servant or a corporate honcho. Because they're all having to deal with a situation that had never ever been contemplated before. तो ये कहते हुए कि कोई भी बच्चा ऐसा नहीं है जो छूटा है कोविड के इम्पैक्ट से, कुछ बच्चे डेफिनेटली ऐसे हैं जिन पर बहुत फोकस करने की जरूरत है, क्योंकि कहीं ना कहीं वो बहुत संवेदनशील स्थिति में है, बहुत वल्नरेबल है, और उनकी वल्नरेबिलिटी को कम करने की जरूरत है बजाय बढ़ाने के। तो वो कौन से बच्चे हैं, मैं तो शुरुआत करूंगी, शायद मैं चाइल्ड ट्रैफिकिंग, अब्यूज और जे सिस्टम पे बाद में आना चाहूं, पर पहले मैं उस बच्चे की बात कर रही हूँ जो शायद अभी जन्मा भी नहीं है और माँ की कोख में है, और क्योंकि इस बार जो कोविड ने अपना कहर ढाया है, वो स्पेशली जो केसेस आ रहे हैं सामने, बहुत सारे प्रेग्नेंट महिलाओं के केसेस सामने आ रहे हैं, जो जिनके बच्चों को इमीडिएटली ऑपरेट करके निकालना पड़ा और वो मदर जो है वो बच नहीं पाई, सरवाइव नहीं कर पाई, या जिन्होंने नवजात शिशु को जन्म दिया और फिर वो सरवाइव नहीं कर पाई। ऐसे बहुत बहुत सारे बच्चे हैं, और जब छोटे बच्चे आते हैं इस तरह से, इनकी जब हम बात करते हैं, तो एक खतरा जो है वो उनके ट्रैफिकिंग का अडॉप्शन के नाम पे बना रहता है। आप लोग सब बहुत सारे सोशल मीडिया पे देखते होंगे, बहुत सारे लोगों ने पोस्ट डाले कि 2 महीने का बच्ची है और इसको अगर आप गोद लेना चाहें तो आप इस बच्चे को गोद ले लीजिए। लेकिन गोद लेने की प्रक्रिया ऐसे नहीं हो सकती, क्योंकि आज आप शायद एक अच्छी भावना से किसी को गोद लेने की बात कर रहे हैं, पर ये हो सकता है कि कोई और जो है किसी अन्य दूसरी भावना से ये बात कर रहा हो, तो उस पे कोई रोकथाम नहीं होगी अगर ये चीज ऐसे ही अलाउ कर दी जाए कि कोई भी बच्चा मिले और उसको किसी भी तरह से किसी को भी सौंप दिया जाए या किसी को ले लिया जाए। ये ट्रैफिकिंग का एक स्रोत है, इट्स अ सोर्स ऑफ ट्रैफिकिंग। व्हेन यू हैव लिटिल इन्फेंट्स हु आर without their mothers, lying in hospitals, in nursing homes, so a lot of baby sale can actually happen at this point of time, and we need to be very cautious. Let us not forward any such messages, and let us report these messages to the police where it says that we've got a 2-year-old baby or there is a child found and anyone who wants to adopt, please contact us. Having said that, I will then come to other categories of children. Children definitely who are infected, और हमारा हेल्थ केयर सिस्टम कितना फ्रैक्चर्ड है इस वक्त, ये हम सब जानते हैं, सब देख रहे हैं। और ये केवल दिल्ली, बम्बई, बेंगलोर, चेन्नई और कलकत्ता की बात नहीं है। रूरल सेक्टर में जो हेल्थ केयर सिस्टम की स्थिति है वो इतनी दयनीय है कि न्यूज जब जो लोग आप देख रहे हैं, हर रोज न्यूज में आ रहा है अब रूरल एरियाज में, ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों में क्या हालत है हेल्थ की सिचुएशन की। तो जो बच्चे इन्फेक्टेड हैं उसके बारे में बहुत ज्यादा काम हुआ नहीं है। और मैं इसलिए कह रही हूँ क्योंकि हमारे देश में पहले से ही स्पेशल बच्चों के लिए हॉस्पिटल्स कम थे, जो सिर्फ बच्चों के लिए हो। केंद्रीय सरकार का एक हॉस्पिटल है कलावती सरन, जो हर स्कीम में उसका एक बजट भी आ जाता है, बट बाय एंड लार्ज बहुत कम हॉस्पिटल्स हैं जो डेडिकेटेड बच्चों के लिए हो। उसको ध्यान में रखते हुए जो है, क्या हमने ऐसी कुछ प्रावधान किए कि हम ये इंश्योर करें, क्योंकि हम जानते हैं हर बच्चे को शायद हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन की जरूरत ना पड़े, बच्चों की इम्यूनिटी फिर भी थोड़ी बेहतर होती है, तो उसको रोका जा सकता है, हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन से उस स्टेज पे जाने से रोका जा सकता है अगर हम टाइमली उन बच्चों तक पहुंच पाए और उन्हें नेसेसरी चीज जैसे ऑक्सीजन की इस वक्त जरूरत है तो वो ऑक्सीजन सप्लाई सुनिश्चित कर पाए। जिन बच्चों का 90 से 94 तक ऑक्सीजन सैचुरेशन लेवल है, उनको सिर्फ ऑक्सीजन की जरूरत है, लेकिन वो ऑक्सीजन भी उन तक नहीं पहुंच पा रहा, तो क्या हम वहां पर कुछ कर सकते हैं? इस तरह की कुछ चीजों पे ध्यान देने की जरूरत है। मेडिसिन पहुंचाना बच्चों तक, हो सकता है हॉस्पिटल जाने के लिए एम्बुलेंस की जरूरत पड़े तो एम्बुलेंस में दिलवाने में मदद करना, ये सब कुछ स्टेप्स है जो हम उठा सकते हैं। एक और श्रेणी है बच्चों की जो केयर गिवर्स हैं। केयर गिवर्स इसलिए क्योंकि उनके माता पिता इन्फेक्टेड हैं, या तो वो घर पे है या हॉस्पिटल में, और दोनों ही परिस्थितियां बहुत ही जो है बच्चों को रिस्क में डाल रही हैं। रिस्क में कई प्रकार की, नंबर एक, उनके पास जानकारी नहीं है, दे डोंट हैव इनफ अवेयरनेस as to what to do, you know, if the parents are COVID infected, and they are constantly seeking and looking for information, but what they get is misinformation. So that's one area where all of us really need to start working. Let's start collecting resources. A lot of people have made those attempts, but when I say collecting resources, I will say verified resources, not just any number. बहुत सारे नंबर फ्लोट करते हैं हम, अब हम एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं कि बच्चों को हम नंबर दे देंगे कि आपको एम्बुलेंस चाहिए तो आप इसको कांटेक्ट करो, और 50 नंबर दे रहे हैं, 50 नंबर पे वो बच्चे फोन करेंगे, आधे नंबर काम नहीं करते, आधे जो है वो फ्रॉड भी है। So, we really need to look at children who are caregivers at this point of time. One, by empowering them with correct information. Second, by reaching support to them when they need it the most. In fact, one of the first cases that got flagged was of a 14-year-old who was really looking for support for his mother. And the family was not very keen on sending the mother to hospital, but the mother's oxygen level was like 53. And there was no way you could have just helped the mother by keeping her at home or in home care. Hospitalization was very necessary, but the family was not supporting this child, and this child really needed assistance at that point of time. So there are many, many, many such children. He's probably not the only one. Then we are talking of children whose, like I said, whose parents are in hospital, they are left on their own. When they're left on their own, who's really looking after them? What is happening? Not everybody can afford paid food, कि बाहर से खाना मंगा लिया, पे कर दिया, सब लोग नहीं afford कर सकते हैं। तो और सिर्फ खाने की बात नहीं है, पढ़ाई की भी बात है। जो छोटे बच्चे हैं उनका ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन चल रहा है, और उनके ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन के टाइम पे पेरेंट्स को साथ होना जरूरी होता है, तो वो पेरेंट है नहीं, तो हम कैसे उनको सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं? We really need to think, and some changes have to be made at a systemic level. Perhaps the schools should have thought about some of these things. But if we are running schools, And if we are continuing with online education, we need to be cognizant of these situations. We need to probably write to the schools and say that don't mark them absent, unke attendance record pe affect nahi hona chahiye. So these are small little steps that can be taken. And as civil society, we probably need to raise these as public demands. Only then things will happen. एक single हम fight करेंगे तो नहीं होगा, but जब वो public demand बन जाता है तो वो हो सकता है. तो वो public demand हमको generate करना है. जो बच्चे child care institutions में हैं, उसकी बात कुछ आर्लीन ने की. Child care institutions में भी बच्चे affected हैं, infected भी हैं. उनका अपने पेरेंट्स के साथ संपर्क बहुत कम होता है, बहुत कम कांटेक्ट होता है. कुछ डिमांड्स हम लोगों की रही और सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने पिछले साल उसको माना भी कि पेरेंट्स के साथ रेगुलर कांटेक्ट रखें बच्चों का, उनसे बात करवाएं फोन पर कितना होता है कितना नहीं होता वो अलग बात है. पर इन चीजों पर चाइल्ड केयर इंस्टीट्यूशंस में जो बच्चे हैं उन पे ध्यान देने की जरूरत है. और इस समय पे ऐसे कई बच्चे होंगे जो इंस्टीट्यूशंस में जा रहे हैं क्योंकि दोनों माता पिता वो खो चुके हैं, और जब तक कोई और ऑल्टरनेटिव अरेंजमेंट नहीं होता तो वो चाइल्ड केयर इंस्टीट्यूशंस में बच्चे होंगे. So that there's a large area to be worked on, and believe me, not all child care institutions have oxygen concentrators, oxygen cylinders, oximeters also कि वो रेगुलरली मॉनिटर कर सके कि क्या बच्चों की हेल्थ क्या है. तो वहाँ एक पूरा एरिया है जहाँ सपोर्ट करने की जरूरत है. बहुत से बच्चे हैं जिनको चाइल्ड केयर इंस्टीट्यूशन से वापस परिवार में भेजा जा रहा है ये कहकर कि बेटर है कि हम चाइल्ड केयर इंस्टीट्यूशंस को डीकंजेस्ट करें ताकि डिस्टेंस, सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग मेंटेन हो सके, वो सारे नॉर्म्स मेंटेन हो सके. लेकिन वो बच्चे जब वापस अपने परिवार में जा रहे हैं तो क्या परिवार इस स्थिति में है कि उनकी ठीक से देख रेख कर सके? कैन वी देन लुक एट सम फॉर्म ऑफ स्पॉन्सरशिप फॉर दोज चिल्ड्रन हु आर गोइंग बैक into a situation where already there is there are difficulties being faced by the families. There are homeless children, shelterless children, and I don't know why nobody is really asking what has happened to them. अचानक से अभी लॉकडाउन हो गए, कर्फ्यूज हो गए, ये बच्चे गए कहाँ? सड़क पे क्यों नहीं दिख रहे? कहाँ चले गए? कौन उठाया इनको? ये सवाल कोई नहीं पूछ रहा है. But and they'll come back, when these lockdowns are lifted. So what happens? We really need to explore this area. Nobody has any clue. Families are facing economic crunch. Many have lost their jobs. And it's not just daily wage earners, but it's also, people in some very good positions who've been asked to leave their jobs. So we need to start looking at these situations, and there are drives, dry ration relief drives are being carried out by civil society organizations. Governments are trying to do something about it, but probably that's not enough. And like Arlene said, we've got to look at the whole issue of dignity and rights. It can't be just charity each time. So and therefore how we go about it becomes very, very, very critical. Children are at risk of economic and sexual exploitation in such situations more than ever before. There will be hidden child labor, a lot of hidden child labor happening. Even though, your restaurants are not open to public, they are still supplying food. And there's still a lot of menial activity happening in restaurants. So I'm just giving one example, but there will be a lot of hidden child labor, and there's no doubts about that. There will be there are reports of sexual exploitation. There are reports of increase in cases of child marriages. At least last year we saw a lot of that. This year, the whole attention has been focused at healthcare because the situation has been really, really sad. But it's continuing, and we need to start looking at those issues as well. Girls being seen as a burden, and therefore child marriage becomes, the easiest option if that can be worked out during such times. But we can imagine the health risks that they are then subjected to, the fact that they will lose out on their education. In fact, online education is not something that everybody can afford. with economic crunch, it's very difficult. If in a family somebody has to decide between who's going to use the one and only one mobile for education, and there is a girl and a boy, then the preference goes to the boy. So the girl children tend to suffer a lot more in different ways. Last year we did have a lot of reports of sexual abuse as well. तो यौन शोषण के जो रिपोर्ट्स पिछले साल आए, इस साल उस पर फोकस नहीं गया है, लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि वो बंद हो गया है, क्योंकि फिर से लॉकडाउन है, लोग घर पे बैठे हैं, और ज्यादातर सारी स्टडीज यही बताती हैं कि ज्यादातर जब यौन शोषण के मामले आते हैं उसमें ऐसे लोग इन्वॉल्व होते हैं जो बच्चों के जानकार है. People who are known to children are the abusers in most cases, and there are about 25 to 30% cases that get registered, where own family member is involved, fathers are involved, brothers are involved, and those situations continue to persist. In fact, a lot of children are at greater risk in these times, and I'm also saying that because alcohol has not stopped, so people have access to alcohol, and with no jobs, they we've heard of cases where men are willing to mortgage their children for alcohol. So there are those situations as well around us, and we need to be cognizant of those situations. There's domestic violence that children are facing. Parents are unable to cope with the whole situation, and a lot of it comes out on children. They are the easiest targets, and therefore a lot of domestic violence being faced by children, and very little mental health assistance coming forward. Although there are limitations of mental health assistance in these times because it's largely tele-counseling that one can do, but at least there is someone that the child can reach out to. And we probably need to, invest in some of those services a lot more than ever before. I've already talked about illegal adoptions. Disability is another area. Children with disability, how they have been impacted, we have no clue. We're completely clueless on that. And if their parent is in a hospital or in quarantine, I mean, we can't even think of what they must be going through. Children in conflict with law. In these growing times of stress, I actually see a lot of children coming in conflict with law for petty offenses, stealing, for instance. Survival has really become an issue. And so when they come in conflict with law, how are we going to look at them and deal with them? The stigma, as Arlene had mentioned, we need to really start looking at these situations more seriously. Similarly, children who are victims of crime, many of them have lost, having worked with these children, we know that, the landlords will ask them to vacate the home, saying that we don't want police coming here anymore. The schools tend to shun them and say that, now she's exposed, so she's going to spoil all the other children. And, there are those kinds of things that are on a regular basis. You can just imagine in a situation like this, although the child may not be going to school, but even if the child has to discontinue online education because the schools are not going to, change certain rules and norms that they've established. So we can just, we can't even imagine the levels things can go to, honestly. And this is a situation where I've seen untouchability at its peak, believe me. Neighbors also have not come forward to help children who've been left on their own. So given that situation, we really need to start thinking as to what is it that we can do. State has done some things. They've announced some schemes, some sponsorships here and there, but the state is also grappling with how to really reach those out to children who need it the most. There's litigation. There are PILs on rights of migrant workers, on right to food. There's a PIL now on also vaccination for pregnant women. So there's one set of people who are engaging with that, as Arlene had pointed out, but there are gaps. There are serious gaps. We want people to volunteer, but a lot of people don't have health insurances, and we want them to be putting their lives at risk. We want frontline workers. We want people to just come to us with oximeters, with medicines, but they have no insurance. And can we, at least as organizations, ensure that at least when we're putting out our volunteers and frontline workers, we ensure that they are insured? So these are some little thought steps that are coming to my mind. I think we can take more through questions and answers. There's so much more to be done and discussed. And thank you so much, Rahul.
What we can do is open it up for question and answer. जैसे हम लोग पहले भी बता रहे थे कि आपका अगर सवाल हो तो क्वेश्चन एंड आंसर का जो बटन है उधर डालें, चैट पे ना डालें. कुछ सवाल आ चुके हैं, तो what I'll do is I'll start with the questions that have already come in. The first question is from Nirmal with ICUS Foundation in Chennai. So Nirmal's question is addressed to Aline. His question is that as a new small NGO which works directly with children from low income backgrounds in urban poor areas, what are the basic structures we need to put in place for child safeguarding? That's one question. And are there any organizations which are willing to advise as we set up these systems? Yeah, Aline, if you could.
Thank you for that. What I understand that whether there is COVID or not, any organization that's engaging with children directly or indirectly, we need to have something called a child safeguarding policy. Basically, this is a document. There are many examples of it on the internet, but if there is any guidance or support that you need, you may contact us and we may support you in this. Basically, where it's a document that has been officially adopted by the organization that says very clearly what is the statements or commitments the organization, is it working from a rights-based approach? These are your commitments to children. This is how you will work. And the values and principles and your vision for children. And then the substantive part of it is reaffirming the principles under the Juvenile Justice Act, as well as UNCRC, and systems for selection of your staff and volunteers, your training, what I mentioned in my slide, the key components of a child safeguarding system, how you prevent, how you respond, and how do you monitor and audit your organization and how it is keeping safe. So there is a system that can be created based on that. In addition to that, of course, you need to be, if you are running a residential care facility, you need to be registered under the Juvenile Justice Act, Section 41. There are procedures for that. So there are different laws that may apply with regard to you being adhering to minimum standards as an organization working with children. It's a longer answer that we may need to continue a discussion for. This is a simple one that I can give as of now. I hope that meets your need.
Thank you, Aline. There's another question for you, Aline. This is from Nageshwari, works with Feathers. थोड़ा नागेश्वरी आप सवाल अगर ऑनलाइन आके पूछे तो अच्छा रहेगा, कृणाल, if you can enable, क्योंकि ये थोड़ा अभी वेग है, but I'll just put it across to.
I understand the question. मेरे को और मेरा हिंदी आता है मेरे को, पर माफ कीजिए, थोड़ा practice नहीं है मेरे लिए, so I can answer in Hindi also. So my presentation was not so much from the health perspective से नहीं था मेरा presentation. Broadly बच्चों को कैसा हम safe रखें, ये जब हम volunteer करते हैं, हम outreach कर रहे हैं, बच्चों लोगों को services दे रहे हैं, तो हमारा organization कैसे हम safe procedures और protocols की तरह से हम कैसे बर्ताव करें, और how do we operate and report and document, etc. बट आपका जो प्रश्न है, जो अगर बच्चे के माँ बाप कोविड इन्फेक्टेड हैं, तो बच्चों अचानक अकेले हैं घर में, तो उनके लिए क्या करना है? आई अंडरस्टैंड दैट इज योर क्वेश्चन. तो बहुत चर्चा हो रही है, क्योंकि कोई फैमिली में अपने रिसोर्सेज है, अपने फैमिली के अंदर, मतलब नेबर्स हैं, कोई अपार्टमेंट कॉम्प्लेक्स हैं. ये तो गांव में भी हमारा जो गांव का जो कम्युनिटी सिचुएशन है, is there systems that कि कोई trusted people हैं जो ऐसे परिवारों को कांटेक्ट में रखे, कोई लिस्ट है कि इन बच्चे की माँ बाप हॉस्पिटल में या बच्चा अकेला है, अभी के लिए ये बच्चे का रिश्तेदार कौन है, और ये रिश्तेदार क्या बच्चे के साथ कुछ रिश्ता है, जस्ट बिकॉज रिलेटिव्स है ऐसा नहीं है कि रिश्तेदार सेफ है, रिश्तेदार भी अब्यूज और एक्सप्लॉइट कर सकते हैं. So these are important questions, but we try and find the resources from within the community, within the family, and support them to look after this child while the parents are in hospital. अगर कोई if they can afford it, नहीं तो उनको sponsorship भी के द्वारा से कोई नैनी मतलब कोई केयर टेकर जो नर्स है जो बच्चों के घर में आके रह सकते हैं, उनका in middle class upper class family nanny systems can be approached. But I would still feel that whether it is lower class, middle class, upper class, if a child suddenly gets orphaned, there are other legal issues that may need to be taken into account. That is a different question. But a safeguarding here is not just for medical health, it is mental health, it is the social relationships, and the immediate resources within that family and that neighborhood may be brought in to play. Or if there is whoever the jurisdictional child welfare committee may be approached, the district child protection unit may be approached, child line may be approached. So through child line or even through the police, these systems to enable immediate and timely response to keep the child safe may be explored. I would not like to generalize because each एक case में कुछ differences हैं. So there is no one formula for every case. I would stop there.
Thank you, Aline. One question from two questions actually, both probably not within the ambit of this today's kind of issues which we are discussing. I had a question for Bharti, but given the work on budgets and all, we had this kind of a issue brought up by Professor Shanta Sinha in the first on the first day. आप कुछ देख सके कि what's been happening to children's budgets over this 2 years, because quite a lot of unspent money and what's been happening, tracking, इसके लिए कुछ हम लोग कुछ कर सकते हैं कि नहीं at a kind of a public advocacy level. Some thoughts if possible, Bharti. I know it's not within the ambit.
बिल्कुल कर सकते हैं और मैं आपको बताना चाहूंगी कि बच्चों के लिए जो बजट है वो कम हुआ है, वो बढ़ा नहीं है और वो बहुत अनफॉर्चुनेट है क्योंकि हमने सोचा था कि अभी कोविड का सिचुएशन है तो कम से कम इस सिचुएशन में जो है और सुप्रीम कोर्ट के डायरेक्शन भी आ रहे थे तो कम से कम हमें लगा इस सिचुएशन में बजट बढ़ेगा, लेकिन वो उल्टा हुआ है. तो ये एक एडवोकेसी का इशू तो है ही और शिक्षा का बजट भी, प्रोटेक्शन का बजट भी कम हुआ है, हेल्थ का बजट भी, तो बहुत स्थिति अच्छी नहीं है. किस तरह से वो इम्प्लीमेंट हुए हैं बजट्स, उस पे अभी कोई जानकारी नहीं है क्योंकि हर साल क्या होता है रिवाइज्ड बजट्स आते हैं और जब तक अब इस बार बजट नहीं आएगा तब तक हमें पता नहीं होगा कि रिवाइज्ड बजट में क्या स्थिति रही, कितना मनी स्पेंड हो पाया, कितना स्पेंड नहीं हो पाया, तो उस पे कहना बहुत मुश्किल है. पर हाँ, बजट्स की तो एक दिक्कत है ही. वी हैव टू रियली टेक इट अप as an advocacy agenda. There is a report that HUC has done for the last year's budget, which is available on our website. वो आप देख सकते तो आपको पता चल जाएगा कि कहाँ कौन-कौन से स्कीम में कमी हो रही है. पर वो कमी करने के बाद जहाँ पे जरूरत है वहां पे वो पैसा डाल नहीं रहे हैं, वो निवेश नहीं हो रहा है जहाँ जरूरत है.
Thank you, Bharti. Question again for Aline, but if Bharti also wants to add on, again, not related directly, this is from Krunal. Ashram schools, the residential schools in many states have been seriously compromising children, especially girls' safety and well-being. Are there any initiatives which you know of by government or CSOs in some states which have tried to address this? Again, both Aline and
I would like to say that an ashram school, I do not think it comes under the purview of a Juvenile Justice Act Section 41 because those children are not children in need of care and protection. I understand they may be admitted there for the purpose of education. So they are not children at risk of harm whether placed there on a CWC order. So this becomes a complex situation where there needs to be a monitoring system and an inspection system. I would guess they would come under the Department of Education. In Karnataka, we had something called the Karnataka Education Child Protection Policy. Originally, it was for educational institutions. So there has been a document that was brought out in 2016 for educational institutions and how those institutions can be kept safe. It subsequently evolved into a broader child protection policy. So whether it's in Maharashtra, whichever state that is, it is a very important issue for at least is there a children's committee that can be established? The law does not provide for it. I don't think the Right to Education Act covers it, but systems wherein children have at least information about Childline, that they can call Childline to say that this is what is going on there. But civil society and especially parents need to have a barge in if necessary and find out what is going on and report to the concerned authorities. I will stop there. Bharati, would you like to take it from here?
I'd just like to add one thing. CBSE has a policy, a child protection policy that is applicable to all institutions, including the ashram schools. तो उस पर आप एडवोकेसी कर सकते हैं और उसको आप एक एजेंडा बना सकते हैं. दूसरा, जैसे आर्लीन ने कहा कि आपके नॉलेज में ऐसा कुछ आता है तो आप तुरंत चाइल्डलाइन को इन्फॉर्म कीजिए, क्योंकि जुवेनाइल जस्टिस एक्ट में कुछ ऑफेंसेस ऐसे हैं जिनको स्पेशल ऑफेंसेस माना गया है, और उसमें ये कहा गया है कि जो बच्चों की देखरेख कर रहे हैं या जिनकी देखरेख में बच्चे हैं, अगर वो ही शोषण करते हैं तो उनके खिलाफ एक्शन केस बुक किया जा सकता है. जैसे सेक्शन 75 है जुवेनाइल जस्टिस एक्ट का, जो क्रूअल्टी के बारे में है. तो किसी भी प्रकार की फिजिकल हो या मेंटल क्रूअल्टी, अगर वो क्रूअल्टी उस व्यक्ति द्वारा हो रही है जिसकी देखरेख में बच्चा है, या उस संस्था द्वारा हो रही है जिसकी देखरेख में बच्चा है, तो वो एक कॉग्निजेबल ऑफेंस है. सो लेट्स रिपोर्ट. Arlene has already talked about reporting. Let's take that role forward of reporting where we come across such instances.
Thank you, both of you. Another question from Nirmal Ikas Foundation for Bharti. Given the massive disruption to social structures and education due to the ongoing COVID crisis and the inability and lack of capacity of the healthcare system to handle this kind of distress, what structures can we put in place at the community level which will help us deal with this in the near, medium, and long-term issues with children's physical and mental health? Are there community-level solutions or strategies which we could look at?
In fact, yes, because I've seen, that a lot of people were very creative last year when suddenly education went online. बहुत से लोग जो है वो afford नहीं कर पा रहे थे mobiles and tablets and laptops. तो कुछ जगहों पे हमने देखा कि I remember in Bihar, in some place, one school principal organized, community viewing of education classes. तो जो CBSE या education department online classes कर रहे थे, उसका community viewing किया और social distancing पे बच्चों को बिठा करके बच्चे वो class attend कर पा रहे थे. तो ऐसे कुछ innovative experiments हुए हैं पिछले साल.
Bharti, the question was about physical and mental health issues at the community level for children. Given that the healthcare system is not able to respond, can we think of healthcare support systems at the community level? So that's
I was looking at education and health both, since that was in the question. So on health, actually nothing much has happened. Like I also mentioned, mental health पर तो केवल टेली काउंसलिंग हुई है, लेकिन मेंटल हेल्थ इश्यूज ऐसे हैं जिसको हम बहुत हद तक कम्युनिटी स्तर पे रिजॉल्व कर सकते हैं. अगर हम कम्युनिटी स्तर पे ऐसे कुछ ग्रुप्स क्रिएट कर सके जो कोई भी बच्चा अगर हमें पता है परेशान है तो हम उसके साथ इंटरेक्शन करना शुरू कर दें. और वो ग्रुप्स हमने इंटीग्रेटेड चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन स्कीम में एक आइडिया था कि विलेज लेवल चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन कमिटीज बनेंगी, और वो आइडिया जो है वो जमीन पे उतर नहीं पाया है, लेकिन शायद ये समय है उस आइडिया को जमीन पे उतारने का और वो प्रोटेक्शन कमिटीज बनाने का गांव-गांव के स्तर पे और वार्ड के स्तर पे, बल्कि मैं तो बोलूंगी वार्ड लेवल चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन कमिटीज बनाई जाए और वहां कुछ लोगों को हम ट्रेनिंग दे सकते हैं. जैसे हम फर्स्ट एड की बात करते हैं, तो ऐसे ही फर्स्ट एड काउंसलिंग या फर्स्ट एड साइकोलॉजिकल असिस्टेंस की भी ट्रेनिंग दी जा सकती है, और एक काडर खड़ा किया जा सकता है ऐसे लोगों का, जो कम से कम संवेदनशील लोग हो, जो बच्चों से इंटरैक्ट कर सके उस समय पे जब सबसे ज्यादा जरूरत है बच्चों को. Arlene may want to add here.
Just want to add key, child to child programs, and there are some very I don't know the names of it, but there are creative things that are being done where children are reaching out to other children, also through community radio and through even the TV. How is it that we can animate the community through very simple, low-cost ways of being at least triggering conversations? So I know things like street theater and Nukkad and stuff like that is now out of the window because of COVID, but we have to find other ways. So I think community radio is really something that may need to be explored.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you. We don't have any more questions at the moment. Are there any more questions? Otherwise, we can look forward to
Rahul, I just want to ask something, if you permit.
Yes, please go ahead.
I want to ask how many people who are here in this meeting today are aware of what their state governments are doing for children, are aware of the key numbers, not just 1098 as Child 9, but key contact numbers of child welfare committees, of juvenile justice boards, of district child protection units. Just a curiosity. If we really want to help, we probably need to collect that information as a first step.
There are two more questions that have come up, Rahul.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, there's one from Nivedita. I think Bharti's, I think Bharti's question was more rhetorical rather than a question. I think it's more like a kind of I would say advice to all the organizations. आप लोग सब grassroots स्तर पे काम कर रहे हैं, children के साथ आपका community के साथ जोड़ है, तो उस लेवल पे एक तो हम लोग जो काम कर सकते हैं, एटलीस्ट बेसिक जो इन्फॉर्मेशन हमारे पास होना चाहिए, स्टेट लेवल पे क्या क्या हो रहा है इस समय, क्या क्या रिसोर्सेज है, किसको कांटेक्ट करना चाहिए, क्या क्या रिड्रेसल मैकेनिज्म्स है, किसके पास किस कारण के चलते जाना चाहिए, उसका एक समझ और उसका एक रिसोर्स बेस अपने स्तर पर होना चाहिए. और उसका जो जानकारी जो आर्लीन बता रही थी, लोकल स्तर पे जितना हद तक हम लोग फैल पाए कि हम लोग जानकारी कोई भी माध्यम से, लाउड स्पीकर्स के ज़रिए या फिर कुछ वॉलंटियर्स के ज़रिए, यूथ वॉलंटियर्स के ज़रिए, तो वो एक अच्छी बात रहेगी. So I think that was the intent. I think two more questions again. One is from Nivedita from Samaveshi. Where should we contact to access services of nanny or sponsorship for caretakers? This is for Arlene.
Now this is ये बहुत मुश्किल प्रश्न है, क्योंकि जो sponsorship schemes जो JJ Act के द्वारा establish होना चाहिए था, and Supreme Court has also urged state governments to ensure that the sponsorship should be made available. Many states are still just about getting activated to ensure this sponsorship is made available. So under the JJ Act, there is supposed to be a provision of at least 2,000 rupees per child. And based on the orders of a CWC or a JJB, this money may be made available. But that means a child has to be a child in need of care and protection, or a child in conflict with law, and you need to access it through the legal procedures in the system. But the state is not the only. In COVID, I think we all understand we need to really engage with civil society and corporate social responsibility. So I cannot say which state you are in, and I may not be able to help you there. There needs to do, and this is where perhaps Wipro Foundation and Azim Premji philanthropic initiatives, in terms of a national database, in terms of what are the civil society sponsorship organizations, which are credible organizations, which can be accessed. So database, I think, is the keyword that I would like people to go with, in terms of an accessible, live, a database of resource directories, links to organizations in other states all across India, where credible, and we need people who are vetting it, updating it, and enabling it. So I will not be able to give that answer to you. But nanny services, I think in Karnataka, we had an organization that conducted Bal Sevika training for young boys and girls who are just out of 10th standard, 12th standard. So in certain states, you may have organizations that have trained young people to play these roles. I have done a Bal Sevika training. So Karnataka State Council for Child Welfare had that. I don't know in your state what services you would have there. I would just, yeah, I'll stop there for now.
What I would request also, there is another question, but I'll hold on to that. And if Krunal, if you can enable Soumya, because we have Soumya from Gubachi making a very important point there. And Soumya, if you can share your experiences, because that's basically that I think will resonate with partners also. Yeah, same situation. Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, this 3 days have been reaffirmation of some of the thoughts that we've been having, and some of the, you know, some of the very important policy implementations that we've been doing at our organization. And even after that, we've realized that there are just so many gaps that we need to fill up. So one thing, in 2018, we'd been functioning since 2015. It's only in 2018 that we realized the import of, you know, the JJ Act and the POCSO policy that we need to have at an org level, and to have SOPs, you know, of if there are cases, what do we do? And, you know, so as a civil society organization, it's an imperative. We really don't have a choice. And as we don't have a choice, it's legally binding. And we need to be able to have steps to respond to, you know, from child marriages to child labor to abuse to, you know, all the other scenarios which need exact steps. You know, it can't be, okay, we'll see when it happens. You know, we need to be able to identify who our, you know, juvenile officer is in the local police station. We need to be in touch with the CWC. We need to be having a relationship there. It's as important a stakeholder as our Department of Education, panchayat, parents, all of that. So that's the point. In fact, when that question was posed about who all have it, it's very important for us to collect that data, because collectively, if we don't have policies, we are heading for a disaster of sorts, or we are working as ostriches, is what I would like to believe. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to point out.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We have again just maybe we'll two final questions again from Nirmal. One is who should we approach to get training on first aid on mental health and health in general? And I really don't know whether that would be possible. And again, that I think we have quite a few organizations out there, hopefully through this series and through our interactions with the resource persons, we'll try to, like Aline was suggesting, get a resource base collated and share with all of you. And maybe it can also be what's happening, and I think which has been very, very encouraging and inspiring. There is a lot of mobilization effort across different groups and crowd mobilization. So this is, and because of social media and all, and like in Delhi, what I heard, Twitter was the go-to in terms of just getting support in terms of oxygen, getting doctors, vaccination. And that's been, and obviously for the privileged sections, but it's been a kind of a mobilizing, crowd mobilization, which has helped quite a lot. That's very promising, and we look forward to the organizations partnering with us to get this kind of a collated database going, and which we can share with everyone.
Can I just come in, Rahul, for that?
Yeah.
One is I just want to add on another point. One is the database in terms of services that are available or volunteers are willing to work on. I would also like to urge both Wipro Foundation and Azim Premji Philanthropic Initiatives to encourage partner organizations to document. The power of testimony of what children are going through and what has been done and what has worked, what is not working, when we're talking about evidence to impact policy and to advocate with government, this evidence is vital. So if systems can be done to train, partner organizations, or maybe even there's a common database, one Google Doc that is shared with 50 people, I don't know how much it can accommodate. But when we document these testimonies of challenges faced or, success stories, which can be replicated using simple no-cost Google Docs, etc., or, whatever it is, to share good practices as well as document for evidence to collect in order to use for advocacy in the future. So I'd just like to add that as a recommendation. You're muted, Rahul, but I'll answer the first question. I think the question was about who can we go to about mental health, training for us. I don't have a specific contact, but I know that NIMHANS has conducted training for all the psychiatric social workers in general on mental health first aid. They've brought out handbooks. So those resources I know are published. To be able to conduct these trainings, I would understand that NIMHANS or their similar institutions in other states, regions, I know there are 5 such institutions. They may be a source that could conduct it. I know TISS also has done something. So I don't have, it's only the something that I know, but I know these 2 institutions could be approached.
No, what I was saying when you came in, Arlene, is that this idea of documentation for evidence, which can feed into advocacy, could be part of the training thing which we were talking about. I think that would help, because just to think about what kind of data and how we can do some rapid assessments in the community and then get this kind of data which can feed into some kind of a collated response and advocacy effort. Again, from Bharti also, I think that would be very, very useful. And we can work with the partner organizations to get something like that going. We will end here. A big thank you to both Bharti as well as Arlene for joining us today. And to all the participants for making these 3 days a very participative and useful exercise for us. Krunal knows about this in terms of how will we be sharing this. There's some conversations in the background, which I'm not aware of. I'm aware of, but I'm not technically competent to comment on. So we'll be hopefully putting these videos up for public access and all that. And hope we can have a few more sessions related and in specific areas down the line in a few days. Yeah. Thank you again. Yeah.
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.